Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily update for November 10th, 2021. I think it's fair to say that reality is hitting the globalists with a vengeance, which is why we now have an opportunity to change history in a different direction, to move the events in a way that puts an end to the drive for a global dictatorship and offers nations an opportunity as sovereign entities to engage in collaborative efforts to improve the conditions for their population for the future. But I want to begin with a quote, and I want you to think about what this implicates, what the implications of this quote are. Here's the quote. "The trouble with almost all environmental problems is that by the time we have enough evidence to convince people, you're dead. We must realize that unless we are extremely lucky, everybody will disappear in a cloud of blue steam in 20 years, unquote. If you think that was stated in the last couple of days from the podium in Glasgow, Scotland, where the climate conference is underway, you'd be wrong. That was from the New York Times, from the population bomb theorist Paul Ehrlich in August 1969. Clearly, his forecast was wrong, as the forecasts coming from Glasgow are also wrong. We're hearing the same claptrap today, which is being used as a justification to take sovereignty away from nations under the pretext of reducing the increase in temperature. In reality, this is an effort to move toward a global dictatorship which will lead to mass depopulation. The question is, are they unstoppable? Well, a little more than 32 years ago, another wrong forecast was made, this one by the leader of the German Democratic Republic, East Germany, Erich Honecker, who proclaimed at a party congress that the Reich, the East German Reich, would exist for 1,000 years. Well, several weeks later, on November 9th, 1989, 30 years ago yesterday, the Berlin Wall came down. There were mass celebrations. People streamed from East Berlin into West Berlin. There were concerts. There were reunions. An incredible opportunity there. Now, Lyndon LaRouche had forecast that this would happen just a little more than a year earlier in a 1988 speech at the Kempinski Hotel in Berlin. And LaRouche was able to forecast that because he was in the middle of a fight, a continuing fight, to transform the world from a mutual and assured destruction mode into mutual assured survival based on new technologies, both in armaments but also in production. Now, just as Honecker believed he was in total control, the Davos billionaires today believe they're in total control. They have the same delusions that Honecker did. History is not predestined. Mankind has the capability to change the course of events. And there are changes underway right now, some of which are for the danger to humanity. First of all, from the side of the oligarchy, COP26 is the move toward a global energy dictatorship, which would be backed by the Great Reset, which is a global central bankers dictatorship, to be enforced by a US, UK, NATO military capability, which as it expands its reach, threatens to launch wars against Russia and China, against Russia in the Black Sea, where there are military maneuvers underway now, and against China in the South China Sea and in Taiwan, where forces are gathering to try to contain both Russia and China. Now, for a human future, we have the rejection going on of COP26. There's no guarantee that they're going to reach an agreement that is enforceable. You have countries from Africa, from Asia, from Eurasia, that have intentions for development, for the betterment of the future for their people. They're not willing to sacrifice economic development for the sake of fake science. It was just announced yesterday that France is joining 10 other European nations to expand nuclear power, while Russia and China have a very aggressive plan to increase clean coal energy production and nuclear power, both of which go against the main themes coming from Glasgow. One other development, the extended troika will be meeting to discuss what to do with Afghanistan. This is the United States, Russia, China, and Pakistan. They'll be meeting in Islamabad. It's not clear if the United States will be there, but the other countries are moving ahead with the idea that if you want a stable Afghanistan, you must first address the humanitarian crisis, which is overwhelming. But then the long-term plan for economic construction is essential. For an example, China is opening up new trade pathways with Afghanistan. They haven't recognized the Taliban government yet, and they're still calling on the Taliban to change from what they did when they were in power 20 years ago. But they also say there's no stability without economic development in Afghanistan. The Global Times writes, quote, "Afghans deserve to be better off through hard work, not planting opium," unquote. Of course, the Chinese remember the two opium wars that were conducted against them in the middle of the 19th century by the British Empire, with the British Navy leveling cities, forcing the Chinese to accept the idea of opium sent to them from India. Now, the Schiller Institute will be holding a conference this weekend, November 13th and 14th, beginning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. It's available online. You can register for it. We'll be taking up these themes, this whole question of the potential for positive changes in the world. Now, along with that, there's another anniversary today to celebrate. Besides yesterday's commemoration of the fall of the Berlin Wall, it was 262 years ago today, on November 10th, 1759, that Friedrich Schiller, the poet of freedom, was born in Marbach, Germany. He was a poet, a dramatist, a philosopher. Through his collaboration with a circle in Weimar, including Goethe, the von Humboldts, and others, they created the Weimar classical period, which stands even today as a hallmark for a Renaissance that brought a completely different conception of man than the oligarchical conception that was dominant at that time. Schiller emphasized in his writings the aesthetical education, the idea that man has a beautiful soul, but it has to be brought out and matured through a process of aesthetical education. He put this forward in his aesthetical letters and other writings. And what he said is that by this kind of education, one's sense of duty is combined with one's inclination. That is, you don't have to be compelled to do what's right. You choose to do what's right because of your development of your beautiful soul. That means that you have a duty and inclination united. Now, his great dramas include Don Carlos, Maria Stuart, Wilhelm Tell, the Maid of Orleans. And among his poems, the most famous include An die Freude, which was immortalized by Beethoven in the Ode to Joy, as we know it, in the choral movement of the Ninth Symphony, the fourth movement of the Ninth Symphony. One of my favorite poems is called Hope, Hoffnung, which concludes with the line, "We are born for that which is better." And what the innermost voice conveys, the hoping spirit ne'er that betrays. That's the optimistic attitude that Schiller brought to his work. Despite living in fairly difficult times, he also lived at the time of the American Revolution. And his attempts through writing and drama to bring the spirit of the American Revolution to Europe led to a tremendous reaction against it coming from the oligarchy of his day. But what better way to commemorate this great, beautiful soul, Schiller, than by participating with us this weekend in the Schiller Institute conference to address the present crisis and to demonstrate that man is born for that which is better, but that we must act to ensure that that occurs. Thanks for joining me today. I will be back tomorrow.